He's gonna bring it come back.
Yeah, hello? Yeah, I'd like to welcome all of you to the College of Complexes tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking about cell phones. Do we truly connect with each other, or are they turning us into zombies? I got to hang up, so give me, yeah.
Good job.
Jerry Evans will be speaking tonight at our presentation of the College of Complexes. The College of Complexes consists of the following format. The first is we'll have a brief announcements period. Then we'll have Jerry Evans speak. Then we'll have our question and answer period, and it's the time for questions and not comments, because after that, we will then follow up with our infamous rebuttal period, which means that you'll have a chance to spout off and take care of everything else. Let's get this menagerie underway, and I gotta hang up now, so, what's that? Oh yeah, don't forget the announcement. Yes.
Without much further ado, we will have hear from Jerry Evans on smartphones. Are we becoming zombies or truly connecting with each other? And Toastmaster, and I don't know what other tenants, but he'll tell us. Jerry Evans.
Thank you, Brown. I'm going to be moving around quite a bit tonight. I'm not going to be stationary here by the lectern this evening, but first I would like to congratulate all of you for coming this evening, because this is my first visit to the College of Complexes. And I'm thrilled to be here because a lot of people could have been here this evening, but for whatever reason, they chose not to be here this evening. So that puts all of you actually in probably the top 10% of the population to come out to an event like this. So congratulate yourself on coming to the College of Complexes tonight. I'm sure as I look around this room, and if I were to poll every single person in the room, you have a device on your possession. Now it could be just a cell phone, it could be a smartphone. Of course, sometimes I think we could all agree that sometimes not so smart people use this device. Tonight I'm going to kind of walk you through what I believe is a pandemic that's not only spreading across the U.S., but certainly is probably the worst plague sweeping the global market today. And I'll explain why that is. Let me begin by, when we talk about zombies, and are we becoming, smartphones rather, are we becoming zombies? Are we truly connecting with each other? So before I begin the formal presentation, just by a quick show of hands, how many of you really believe, because of using technology, i.e. smartphones, we're truly connecting with each other? Okay, there's a few individuals in the room who believe that. Well, I'm going to share some statistics with you tonight in terms of how we're using smartphones and technology, because I think we would all agree that communication is ever evolving. My daughter and her boyfriend are here tonight, and they happen to be millennials. So the way that they communicate is probably a little bit different than some of us who are more seasoned citizens, and the way that we embrace and use technology. So actually, each and every one of us, you see them everywhere, every single day. Now, you might notice these zombie-like creatures walking around with kind of this mindless, blank look on their face. They've got a soft smile suffused on face. They're looking downward. They're bashing their lashes southward. And they're boxing their fingers on the keypad in some sort of a nervous fix. And more importantly, they've got their heads up, their handheld assets. I'll let you figure that one out. For me, it's like a scene from The Sixth Sense. I see dead people, the walking dead, what I would call having a near-life experience. Because they're so engrossed in what they're looking at that screen. For me personally, it just makes me want to scream, heads up! Because more and more people, their heads are down no matter what they're doing. So we talk about, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, good. when we talk about the smartphone zombie apocalypse, and you look at this image on the screen, you notice a couple of different things. Have any of you ever noticed people in those situations? Right?
Walking down the street.
If we walk, maybe not here, but if we're walking downtown Chicago, more often than not, because I know it's happened to me personally, you're walking down the street, and sure enough, someone's either walking straight towards you, like this gentleman is right now, and they've got their head buried in their device, not paying attention to the surroundings, not looking at who's coming towards them, and next thing you know, they run into them, or as the picture shows, a person walking down, and all of a sudden they run right into a post. Because again, they're not paying attention to what's going on around them. And you have those individuals that, especially again, downtown Chicago, it happens in the suburbs as well, they're taking a step off the curb, the traffic light is red, they're not paying attention, and you and I are driving, and they walk right in front of us. You've got to slam on the brakes, right? Now, if we hit them, whose fault is it?
It's yours.
It's our fault, correct. Even though they're not paying attention to what they're doing when they're walking across streets. So to me, that's the smartphone, part of the smartphone zombie apocalypse. So you see this all the time when people have got the glow of the screen, and a lot of times, like coming here tonight, Virginia and I were driving and looking to the cars next to us. Well, you can automatically tell right away because they're not looking ahead, they're not looking right, they're not looking left, their head's down, and you know, even though you can't see their smartphone or the device, you know what they're looking at.
Best time to do it.
Best time to do it. So they've got that minute and a half or 2 minutes, they're waiting at the traffic signal, so they're checking their email, they're checking texting, and we'll get into texting in a few minutes, but you know they're looking at this device. Now what's more scary is if they continue to drive and they're still hand on the wheel and then they're trying to text. Now I know there's probably a few super texters in the room, but your brain can't process both of those things at the same time. Especially if you're not driving down, if you're driving down 90, if you're driving down one of the tollways, or if you're driving down the Kennedy at 55, 65 miles an hour, literally, if you take your eyes off the road, we'll get into distracting driving a little bit later on, if you take your eyes off the road for 5 seconds,
1 second.
even 1 second, that's correct, but in terms of 5 seconds, that means you've traveled the distance of an entire football field.
Oh, yeah.
Think about that. 55, 65 miles an hour, you travel the distance of a football field. There's no way you can react that quickly. But we'll cover that later on. The graph that you're looking at on the screen, and this is where it really gets really interesting, the population right now globally is about 7.2 billion. You look at the screen from 2010 and then projected through 2019, you see this figure here. So here we are in 2016. Those are the number of smartphone users in the United States right now. 207.2 million. Again, can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay. So number of users right now is 207.2 million. In terms of the number of subscribers globally right now, it's almost 7.1 billion subscribers. So that means a lot of people have multiple devices, not just one. But 7.1 billion subscribers. The number of text messages, and we'll talk about text separately, the number of text messages that are sent, which is a primary communication right now, about 70% text, is 1 trillion text worldwide. 1 trillion. Yes, sir.
Good.
So they project by 2019, 236.8 million in the United States. That's not counting global, but that's just in the U.S. alone. So here's what's interesting. Despite the benefits, smartphone users, they say their phone is not always needed, but 46% say that's something they can't live without.
Right.
And we'll get into what they call nomophobia in a minute, which I think you'll find really interesting. Nomophobia, right. So 54%, say 54% say their phone is not always needed, but 46% say that they can't live without it. I'm sorry, am I blocking you, Gene?
No.
Okay.
I'm listening.
And then in terms of freedom, distraction, connecting, annoying, financial burden, you can read all that on there.
Yep,
But the important thing is that 46% say that they can't live without it.
that's right.
So when we talk about connecting,
Yep.
it's like, oh my God, I can't be without my smart device.
Right.
We'll talk about the reasons for that. So let's talk about smartphone dependent. When you get into some of the age demographics and ethnicities, etc., there's some variances with that. But in terms of percent of U.S. adults that have a smartphone, a lot of those, 7%, they're smartphone dependent. And what that means is that they don't have internet connection at home, so they rely on their smart device for that internet connection. They do their email through that, texting, etc. They don't have a laptop or a PC or a tablet at home. So 7%. So 64% right now own a smartphone. 64%. And 15% have limited options in terms of online access or, other than a cell phone. 10% have no broadband service. And then 7% kind of overlap with some of those things. And this was done by the Pew Research, actually very current in 2014. You can pull that up online. You can see the survey if you'd like. So let's talk about spending on smartphones. So right now in 2013, there was 121 million, which that number has since gone up to about 150 million. 168 million own a smartphone in 2014. Every 22 performant months is a smartphone user upgrades to the new device. Because we've all seen in the news people standing in line at the Apple store, right, for the latest smartphone. The majority of smartphones right now are Android versus iPhones, which Apple has about 17% of the market. But 39 billion smartphone sales in 2013. The communication industry projects that smartphones, especially 2018 when we get into some of the other countries, that smartphone sales will exceed $1 trillion. $1 trillion. Now let's talk about social media. So if you look at total population, 7.26 billion, and you look at the number of active internet users, active social media accounts, mobile users, and active social accounts, you can see the variances between those numbers. So active internet users is almost 3 billion, 2 billion for active social media accounts, 3.6 billion for unique mobile users, which are individual users, and then active mobile social accounts. Again, it just shows the increase of using in terms of smartphones, and in that sense, we're becoming much more social. My question to all of you, to all of us, are we really becoming addicted?
Yes.
Yes. 83% of people now own a mobile phone. 35% of mobile phone users own smartphones, actually 36% now. 5 in 10 people confess to being addicted to their mobile phones. Again, we get the nomophobia. The most common activities uses on the phone, 44% access the internet, 23% social networking, 38% send and receive email, 73% take photos. Because if you think of Virginia and I went to see the Eagles, and we were talking about the number of people that actually had cameras taking pictures of the Eagles.
Yeah.
So today, this morning, actually, there were more people actually with actual cameras taking picture of the Eagles, and there were only a couple people out there with their smartphones taking pictures. Well, smartphones have pretty much replaced people using their cameras now, haven't they?
Yeah.
Because you can go to almost any event or any kind of venue, and they're taking pictures with their smartphones versus a digital camera, as the cameras, the megapixels have gotten better and better. Last one is, how much are you willing to sacrifice? What would people rather give up for a week instead of their mobile? 70% said alcohol,
Right.
right? 63% said chocolate,
Yep.
and 33% said
Sex.
sex.
Yep.
Said sex. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
33% would give that up for their smartphone. To each his own, I suppose.
Oh, wait a minute.
This is interesting. So when people wake up the first thing in the morning, what do they do? Well, if you've got your smartphone, if you've got your device, 44% check their mobile device for emails, text messages, or voicemail.
Right,
First thing.
that's right.
First thing.
Yep, that's
And you
right.
can see the different percentages. So 5%, 16%, brush your teeth, etc. Or put them in, right, Rudy?
That went over well.
There you go.
Brush your, or put them in. Brush your teeth, 19%. You know, take a shower, 16%. But I find it interesting that they check their smartphone, their emails, their text, or voicemail before anything else.
Yeah, first things first.
So let's talk about nomophobia. Who's familiar with nomophobia?
You're not having.
Yes. We'll dive into this because this really drills it down to, you know, the whole premise of, you know, are we becoming more connected or less connected? So nomophobia literally means no mobile phone phobia. Now the term nomophobia was first coined in 2010 in the UK. The UK actually took a survey company and said, hey, we want you to survey Britons in terms of how they use cell phones. So after they surveyed them, they came out with some statistics, and they found that people actually had fears about either being away from their mobile device or not having their mobile device, and what some of those fears were. So when we look at that, so 60% of everyone right now has nomophobia. So a lot of you sitting in this room tonight, you could actually be infected and not really know
I
it.
just turned off my cell phone.
So if we talk about, what is it, the Zika virus now? Is it the Zika?
Zika.
Zika, I'm sorry, Zika.
Wait a minute.
So this is more pandemic than the Zika right now, because 66% of the population actually has nomophobia. 70% of women have mobile phone separation anxiety, compared to us men, we only have 61% of anxiety or nomophobia.
Hey, speak for yourself.
You have more than that too? 77% of people, now this is when you get into age demographics, 77% of people 18 to 24, they are a little bit more nomophobic than some of us who, again, are more seasoned citizens that are, you know, beyond 25, 34, and double that. 47% of men are likely to have two mobile phones compared to 30% of women. Now, when we get into statistics, when they did this, 66% of people, they either sleep with or next to their smartphone. Now, both men and women have told me they think their spouses are cheating on them with Siri.
With Syria?
Siri.
You might want to explain what Siri is to some of the people who are less.
Siri is where you can ask Siri, if you have an iPhone, you can ask Siri any question and they'll give you an answer to it.
What's Siri?
Siri.
Siri?
Siri. S-I-R-I. Siri. Yeah, my daughter has Siri. And then now they've got the new device that they're advertising, I forget what the name of it is, where you can ask it any question and it'll give you an answer. So basically that's what Siri is, but it's for its Apple devices, not for Android devices. Okay?
Cortuna is the one for Microsoft.
Pardon me?
Cortuna is
Cortuna.
the one for Microsoft.
Right. So 66%, you know, sleep with their smartphones. 20% of people would rather go shoeless for a week rather than give up their smartphones. Now, among high school and college students, a growing percentage of them actually shower with their cell phones.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, how does that?
They actually shower with their cell phones. So now my question is, do they use virtual cell soap or virtual cell body wash? I'm not so sure about that. But that's pretty crazy. And 72% of people report that being within 5 feet of their smartphones the majority of the time. So they want to be close to that device pretty much at all times. You ever seen this? We're in a restaurant tonight. Fortunately, none of us are looking at our smart devices.
Hey,
but I'm sure that a lot of you have gone into a restaurant. Rudy's got his out, I know. But you've seen couples sitting at a dinner table,
Yes.
and they both have their smartphones out rather than
And
really
talking to each
connecting
other.
and enjoying each
That's
other.
right.
Oh, shoot.
And I think we've all seen families do the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah,
When my daughter and my son, when we used to go out with the family before, advent of smartphones, we would sit around the table. It was just about conversation,
Right.
face to face,
Yep.
and nobody was on their devices.
Television put paid to that.
What is this, Andy Hardy World?
And I remember my daughter's in the room tonight, my daughter Nicole over here, and I remember one year on Father's Day, and my daughter was guilty of this, that she would have her smartphone out, and it's like she had to check it all the time. I said, okay, new rule, from now on, when we're together as a family, that we put away devices and we just get together as a family. Because whatever text mail, email, voicemail, etc., that could wait for at least a couple hours. The world's not going to fall apart because we didn't check it.
Child abuse.
What'd you say, Rudy?
I say
That was Charlie's comment.
Child abuse.
Charlie, what'd you say?
child abuse. Child abuse.
Yeah.
Huh?
Child abuse.
Abuse?
Child.
Abuse.
Child. Okay. You've seen people sitting around again in a restaurant where 4 or 5, 6 people, a group of people are all staring at their smartphones rather than interacting with one another. So again, are they really connecting with one another? Or are they just being distracted by the device?
What else would you do?
If you're on a train,
Yep.
so those zombies that I talked about, you see them in hotels, you see them at restaurants, you see them at stores, you see them at malls, you see them on elevators, you see them on trains, you see them at airports. My neighbor, she's a flight attendant for American Airlines. So let me give you kind of a tip of, you might want to try this. Now, you might risk bodily injury if you try this. So what she does when she comes home from a trip, and she basically flies out of O'Hare almost every single week. Her name is Ingrid. So she's walking through American Airlines concourse, and so she's walking down the concourse, and usually there's some business person coming towards her, not, again, their head buried in their smartphone, not paying attention to surroundings, not caring about anyone else around them. And just as they get real close to her, and they're about to bump into her, she just stops dead in her track when she's, pulling her carry-on, and right when they get almost right in her face, and they realize right there, she goes, "Heads up!" And it just startles and shocks them, and it kind of wakes them up. And some people, they would just go like this. They'll just go right around her. They won't even stop. Totally oblivious to her. And this happens more often than not when she, goes in and out of the airport. They're having a birthday party.
Take pictures of the cake.
Take pictures of the
That's a nice
cake.
cake.
Yeah, what else would you
It
do?
is, look at
Take,
the cake.
take
Great
pictures of
looking
the cake. It's a
cake.
big cake. I know. Virginia said it's a big cake, Jerry.
That's a nice
But they're all standing there around with their cake. I'm going to show you a video a little bit later on that Tim will pull up, and we'll come back to the birthday party. Teens and tweens.
Oh, yeah.
The average tween today text 3,000 a month. 3,000 texts a month. And some parents have said that their teens text as many as 5,000 to 10,000 texts a month. On average, they'll text 100, sometimes 100 to 150 times per day.
Wow, there's CC in everywhere.
That's, and they don't. My son Kevin, 3 of his friends, when he would be driving, he would say, "Dad, a lot of times when we're in the car together, instead of us really interacting and talking to one another," he said his friends, they were all either texting someone else or emailing someone else while he was the driver. And my son's 28. This was a couple years ago, and he said he finally told him, "Look, guys, because when we're together, can't you really put away your device for a little while so we can just really talk to one another?" You've seen this, I'm sure. People are standing in line waiting for food at one of the food courts. Could be McDonald's, could be Burger King, or whatever. And speaking of Burger King, do you know that handheld devices have even invaded Burger King?
No.
No way.
Yes, can you believe that? So what you can do now is with your handheld device, you can actually tweet with one hand, and then you can dip your chicken fries with the other hand. And that's become part of their marketing campaign. It says right here, dip with one hand and tweet with the other hand your chicken fries.
There you go. Eat one hand.
So they've infected the king, Burger King. So you see that in people waiting in food courts. As I said, in airports.
Yep.
I thought this was kind of interesting, is that if you look at the cartoon, it said, did anyone else read the story about how electronic gadgets undermine our ability to focus and concentrate? Darn, the Padres lost yesterday.
Yeah.
And you see mom, dad, the kids.
They're not paying attention.
Right. But a couple of them have tablets, and the other kids, the two kids, they've got their smart devices.
Right.
Now that's real good family time, don't you think?
What else would you do?
Yeah.
Another scenario. So now you have boyfriend and girlfriend kind of going along, and they're on the phone actually talking to one another. Addicted to our iPhones, they're having a laugh. Oh my God, yeah, laugh out loud. Gotta go. Gotta check who's tweeted about it. And then you see the guy on the skateboard and the people in the background sitting on the grass, and they've all got their phones out.
Right.
Now think about that. You know, when we were growing up, and you're out playing, or you're out walking in the park, you go to Lincoln Park, you go downtown, and you actually took time to kind of observe what was going on around you. Really take in your surroundings. And so you're looking at your smart device, you're plugged in a lot of times, and you become oblivious to what's around you. You go, well, Jerry, that sounds pretty simplistic. You know, maybe you're making it sound too easy. But more often than not, this actually happens. And it happens more and more, no matter what kind of environment that you're in. Now, let's talk about distracted driving. We've all seen it. We witness it almost every single day. And there's no avoiding it. Because when they enacted, no texting while driving, you see it on the expressways, the tollways, text and drive. You shouldn't do that. And right now, there's only 39 states that have it on the books. And then you have the other states that don't have legislation regarding that. But it's one of the most dangerous things that you can do. Because I'm going to show you a video in a few minutes that'll really show you graphically what happens. Because before, when we were talking about you take your eyes off the road for literally just a couple seconds, and what can happen that results in a fatality.
Yep.
And to me, none of our lives, especially not our children's lives, are worth taking a glance, looking at a text, reading an email, checking a voicemail while you're hurling down the highway at 55, 65, or even 40 miles an hour for that matter. So let's talk about distracted driving. Here's the reality, folks, is that this is 2011, but now 2012, 2013, 14 statistics are coming out. Total killed. You can see the numbers. 3,337 of those distracted driving. The number of DUIs is actually dropping. It's dropped by 20%. But the number of what they call now DWTs, driving while texting, has increased dramatically.
Yeah.
The guy in the state of Illinois who received the first ticket, which was back in 2011, I believe, it was in January, Des Plaines police stopped the gentleman. So they saw him weaving, and they determined after the officer came up to him and said, "Sir, have you been drinking?" And the guy said, "Yes." And not only that, not only he had been drinking, the same time he was texting when the officer stopped him. So he got charged with a DUI and DWT. It cost him $500. He was the first person in Illinois when the law was enacted to get both DUI and DWT at the same time. So you see no seatbelt, drunk driving, etc. But to me, that's horrific when you look at those numbers. And that's all because people were distracted. Now, there's a number of different ways, to be honest with you. There's a lot of different ways we can become distracted right when we're driving. Because if those of you who have a GPS in your car, the Lost and Finder, when you go on there, you're punching directions in there if you're driving, so now you're distracted from that.
Right.
Even turning on the radio, fooling with your temperature controls in the car. And what happens a lot of times, people are reaching over to try to get something out of the glove box, or something
Right.
may have dropped on the seat. There's a myriad of different ways you could become distracted.
Is it distracted by cell phones?
Yes,
3000?
yes. Yes, it is.
Wow. That's a lot.
So when you look at distraction, what we call Distractology 101 and Learning Challenge, look at where you're at on the meter. Safe? Oh my God, watch out. So we all have to be conscious of how we're using the device. Because technology is a tool, it's not an excuse. It's there to serve us, not for us to serve it. And become so distracted that, you know, we put our lives in jeopardy, passengers in our vehicles. And the video you'll see later on, when you're a passenger in a vehicle, I was telling Virginia the story. In fact, there's a young man, he had a promising future as a quarterback. He went to Arizona State, and he was going to be one of the first draft picks for the NFL. The kid was 18 years old. He was on his way to a practice, and he and his buddy, he was in the passenger seat. About halfway when they were going to the school, there was another driver who was glancing at their cell phone. They determined afterward that he was texting. The person hit him head on. And the kid was paralyzed from neck down. That ruined his future as a starting quarterback in the NFL. All because somebody sent a text. And there was two sisters, which is really sad, where her younger sister, they would always text back and forth. When she was on the way home, she was coming home actually to her birthday party. And so her older sister sent a text to her, one simple text. But when she sent that text to her younger sister, her sister glanced away from driving, looked at the text, she ran into another vehicle, the car rolled over, threw her out of the car about 50 feet, and she was instantly killed. Now, do you think her older sister felt guilty about that? Because, you know, afterwards she said, what if I hadn't sent that one text? Just one word, and they actually showed the phone and the text that she sent. So there's a slogan, park the phone before you drive. None of our lives are worth reading a text, an email, or checking a voicemail when we're driving, folks. And even if we're driving here in the city of Chicago, you're only driving 20, 25 miles an hour, let alone 40 or higher speed, where you're actually not only risking your own life, you're risking another driver's life.
Yep.
Everybody know where Hubbard Tunnel is on 90?
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to have lunch with my daughter. This is going back probably about 2 years ago. She works for a company called Career Builder, so I was going to have lunch with her. On the way down, there was a lady in the middle lane right before Hubbard Tunnel. She was driving a Lexus SUV, and she was on her cell phone. She had a cup of coffee in the left hand, so she's got the coffee. She's got her cell phone in her right hand. Somewhere or another, she's managed to steer the car. She's got her daughter in the back seat. Now that's bad enough, right? And I don't know how she managed to do this. I don't know if she had an extra arm or something. But right before we got to Hubbard Tunnel, all of a sudden she kind of flips her head forward and she starts going like this. She starts, I don't know what do you call it? Back combing or forward combing your hair? So she was actually she dropped her head down, and I'm like, how is she still managed to take control of the vehicle?
No?
And I got as far away from this woman as I possibly could. So you talk about, you know, we think that we can all multitask.
That's right.
Yep.
It's an essential skill.
Yes. To do 5 different things incorrectly.
Right,
Yeah,
that makes perfect.
that's right. But they got it done.
So now,
She died an hour
Tim, will
later.
you? So I want to show you 2 short videos. You know, when I talked about the first video is It Can Wait. Tim has got it keyed up here.
This is some police stuff.
Oh, technology.
I gotta check my phone.
Someone's cell phone is ringing, guys.
All the time.
It can wait, right?
Yep.
Hold on, I think I got a text from Rudy.
Oh, you got it. You got a cell phone call?
Okay, back it up for a minute. Okay, stop. Just put it on pause for a second. Put it on pause. Okay, this is called It Can Wait.
It can.
It can wait. Go ahead.
41, 42, 43.
He's counting carbs.
Who loses one shoe? No dog today.
Could be a typical situation.
Let's do
that
this, baby girl.
happens every day.
Say goodbye to the gang. Elizabeth wants to come too. Okay, Elizabeth can come, but that's all. Come on. Sorry, guys.
Phone 7? Sure. That'll be $36. Rewards card?
No. Hey, you know what? Give me one of those lottery tickets too. The big one.
Hey.
Hi, what's up?
Hey, so I think I'm gonna skip out early and try and catch a few innings of Danny's game.
Oh, I'm sure you'd love that. Hey, what do you want to eat tonight?
Would you eat at Mazzoni's?
Ugh, don't make me.
Alright, that's okay. I'm good with whatever.
Mommy, Elizabeth wants some ice cream.
Well, she's a good girl. Maybe we can get some on the way home.
Well, Erin called. She left a message with the other broker.
Okay, so now what?
Now we wait.
Oh, well, don't worry, because we are about to become filthy rich anyway.
Finally.
Yeah, lottery's over $200 million. I got a ticket, so I think we're good.
Oh, why didn't I think of that?
Well, that's what you have me for.
¿Quieres ver tu programa ahora?
No, comienza hasta las 2.
Ok, si me necesitas, entonces voy a estar afuera.
Stupid.
Hey, do you want me to pick anything up?
You know what? I'll leave Mazzoni's. I don't care.
Hey, all right.
Love you.
Love you.
Mommy, I forgot my crystal bracelet.
That's okay, sweetheart. It'll still be there when we get back. Everyone loves the picture I posted of you.
Oh my.
Here it comes.
AT&T reminds you, it can wait.
So that's the first video. Now we'll show
Give
you.
a second.
Yeah, we'll pull up
Okay.
the second one. So you think that makes the point of how critical it is?
Was that done with stunt doubles?
Oh, yeah.
How'd they make that film look like a crash with people in the cars? Do you have any history of it?
Yes. I'll give you an answer to that. We're done here.
Okay.
Okay. So now the name of this is I Forgot My Phone.
Oh,
So I'm talking about waking up in the morning.
Like, who knows how long he was driving? I saw him pull out of the parking lot and turn right, and the box is still stuck under his car. So who knows how long he was driving with that box under his car? I like bet he got home, he pulled into his driveway.
I'm this guy. I'm not. Wow. Like you. It's not. It's not
I don't think
real.
it's real. I don't think it's
Maybe there's a. I see the lineup for Mr. Wasted. The Empire State Building is like really close to it. So it's a beautiful.
Hey, get aboard your shoes. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Kevin. Happy birthday to you. Yeah.
Okay, Tim, you can.
Oh, no car carriage.
There's a whole series of videos that you can actually pull up on YouTube online that AT&T did as PSAs, public service announcements, that are pretty graphic because for those of us who are mature enough or old enough, you know, when we were taking driver's ed in high school perhaps or even later on, I remember the movie that I saw was called Mechanical Death. I don't know if any of you are young enough to remember that, but it was pretty graphic compared to that time back in the 60s. But some of the ones now, the gentleman asked the question, which I want to respond to, they just did this through reenactment, yes, through stunt doubles and stuff, and of course, you know, now with the way they can film things, make it look so realistic. And what I liked about this is when they did it in reverse, to take it back to the point of where she looked at the device. And that was the point of where when she glanced at that picture and she took her eyes off, then that's where the collision happened. And you can see some others. There's one, I forget the name of it, that was filmed in Britain. That's even more graphic because it has teenagers in the car, and I'm not sure, quite honestly, how they filmed that one, but that looks like, I mean, it's really, when you look at that, anybody that has a child, especially a teen, if that doesn't drive home the message, I don't know what will. Because it happens all the time. You saw the statistics before about the number of deaths every year. There's, you know, almost 400,000 people a year that are injured who are injured through distracting driving. So when I say that it's really a pandemic and it's the worst plague, you know, sweeping the world today, it truly is. Because it's not just happening here. You go into the emerging countries, you look at China, you look at India. By the year 2019, 2020, China, the number of smartphones that they'll have is astronomical. They now have almost more smartphones than anywhere else in the world. India's coming up pretty quickly behind them. So I hope that illustrates some of the things the message that I want to get across tonight. I want to open this up to, you know, feedback, comments, because I think it's a dialogue that we all need to be involved in, that we should be a part of, because it impacts and affects all of us. It doesn't matter about your age, doesn't matter about your gender, your ethnicity. It impacts each and every one of us. Yes.
All right, Mike.
All right, let's thank our speaker. Ron's going to come up and help you moderate, Jerry. All right, I'm going to put the mic, the mic back on so that, you know, anybody can hear it. Huh?
All right.
Thanks, Ron.
Yeah.
All right, you have questions for our speaker?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Bill Wendt was the first hand I saw, and then Don Ritchie.
Okay?
What is about the least expensive device that can both visit websites and do emails?
I'm sorry?
What is the least expensive device that can visit websites and do emails?
The least expensive device?
The least expensive device that could go to websites and receive emails.
The least expensive device. Well, you could do that with an inexpensive tablet. You can get a tablet now for less than $100.
Try 55.
Yeah. Depending on the size of the tablet.
The size of the tablet and if it's got a plan or
For
not.
those of you who frequent, of course, the public library, you can go and sign up and use their computer to library. So you don't even have to have a device in order to access, some of that.
All right, Don?
What's a smartphone? Oh no, I'm serious. What is your definition of a smartphone?
When you go back to, the history of cell phones, but let's talk about, today. Smartphones, basically, we're all carrying around a very sophisticated computer. Because the way that we can interact with it compared to, let's say, 10 years ago, because smartphones really started 10 years ago. And the applications that we can use on smartphones, just basically a basic phone where you can call, receive emails, and text. You don't have those other applications with those phones versus smartphones.
So what's the difference? Okay, well, so you're saying that the difference between a smartphone and a normal mobile phone is
Much more sophisticated, yes.
is that you can do so any phone, any cellular phone where you can do more than just make phone calls is a smartphone.
When you have all these other applications loaded onto it, yes.
How? I mean, okay.
Because there's an infinite number today of applications that you can put on a phone.
I get
Yes.
that. I get that. But how many? No. I wanted to ask the gentleman, the speaker. Now I'm not asking. I didn't ask Mike Lehman. So what? So if it only if your cell phone only does phones and send and receive emails, it's not a smartphone. It has to do more than just that to be a smartphone.
Correct.
So
my opinion, yes.
Okay, but so by your definition, any cell phone that can do more than just make phone calls and check your email is a smartphone. Is that correct?
In my opinion.
Okay. Thank you.
Because
That took 10 minutes to figure out.
When you first of all, the majority in terms of the way people interact with a smartphone now, 70% to 80%, more and more people are doing it through text. They're not actually, when we call them smartphones, I call them handheld devices because they're really not primary. Their primary use today is not to make phone calls.
Their primary use is to do this.
Correct. Their primary use is to text, to send emails, etc. And to get, latch on to, sign on to social media.
Yeah.
Russell Johnson.
Yeah, now, you're saying that many of us are addicted to these. There's a lot of us that have them because we have to for work purpose. Like if it wasn't for work, I wouldn't even need to have it. All my dispatches, I have to have my phone for.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree
All
with
right.
You're on call, please.
One for the cell phone. All right, Mike Lehman.
Are you, since a portion here was on distracted driving and roadway deaths, which I think is higher. I think
It's ever on the increase.
I think drunks are a third, speeding is a third, and distracting is a third. Those 33,000 deaths. Anyway, do you know if there is there a way? What's the penalty? Is it a homicide if
Yes,
you kill somebody while you're texting?
if you're in an accident, if you're involved in a fatality, it's a felony.
How bad of
If
a
they
felony?
can, in terms of punishment,
Yeah.
I don't know right off the top of my head. It varies. Sometimes it varies by state. But if they can determine at the point of that collision, if it results in a fatality, they can look at the phone record that you were texting or that you were emailing, whatever you were doing on that phone at that moment, you're going to be charged with a felony.
How good are they at that, and what do they check?
They're getting much better because the National Highway Traffic Safety Association Virginia Tech, they've all done studies on that. What's happening now, they're trying to figure out, using technology, how they can catch more people actually doing that on their phones, because sometimes you know how they set up the checkpoints for driving under the influence. They are now, some states are starting to do that when they're catching people texting. Because I'll be honest with you, I was leaving a meeting in Downers Grove. I had just come out of the meeting, and I didn't have the phone up to my ear. I had it down here, and I'll admit that. And I just looked at my phone, and I had it on. You respond by voice. State police. I was just getting ready to get on the ramp. He stopped me, and he came up to the window and he, sir, he says, it's illegal to text and use your phone. I said, officer, I was just looking at my phone. He says, I don't care. He goes, you do know that it's illegal to do that? I said, yes, officer. I didn't argue with the guy or anything else. And I said, I realize, in fact, I speak about this. And then he went back to the car. He checked my records to see if I had any tickets or, if I was at risk or anything. And he said, sir, he goes, you understand the dangers of it. He says, I'm going to let you go this time. He gave me a warning. But otherwise, it would have been a $500 fine.
You're lucky.
Yeah,
You're lucky.
Texting or talking on the phone.
$500 phone. Fine.
People are talking all the time on the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's in terms of enforcing it.
Okay. Next question, Robert Holland.
I actually have two questions, but I'll just ask one, and if you can, then we'll follow up.
Sure.
You focused on the smartphone, but I'm curious, how broadly would you generalize this effect to other forms of mobile media?
We're more at risk using smartphones the way that we use the devices. Because, let's think about it. A lot of these situations, circumstances that we see, a lot of it is common sense. Why would we put ourselves in some of these situations and circumstances using it the way we do? I'm not against the technology. I fully embrace the technology. It's just the way people use it. Because let's talk about distracted driving just for a moment. When we're in a vehicle and you're hurling down the highway and you've got a child in the car, you've got your girlfriend, you've got your wife, a loved one, family member in that car, why would I risk that for them? Because that's worse than if I were having 2 or 3 drinks.
Is there a way of distinguishing between modes of use between a smartphone that's enlarged, a tablet, or a laptop?
I'm sorry, say that again now?
Is there a way of distinguishing between modes of use between a typical smartphone, the extra large smartphone, the tablet, or the...
Yeah.
Don't they all do pretty much the same things?
Well, the more focus is really on the smartphones than the tablets, because of some of the smartphones have actually got bigger. My daughter's boyfriend Josh,
they function like tablets.
You have a Plus, right? Yeah. So it's a little bit larger, device. So the screens are larger. But I don't know that they've really thoroughly done the studies when it comes to comparing that, to a tablet and some of the other devices. They're more focused on just the smartphones themselves.
I can add a
National
little
Highway
bit.
Traffic Stop, the VTTI, which is Virginia Technical Institute, the Pew Research that you saw up on the screen. We're not going to go through this tonight, obviously, but I have, for example, all the reports that the Pew Research Center did. I mean, they really go into depth. It's actually an 84-page report. And there's some others, the Virginia Technical Institute, they do reports and studies on this. Statistica, they run numbers on this. And so they pretty much mirror each other. And they get into great detail about the different devices. But again, more than focus on just a smaller smartphone.
Right.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Carl Schwett.
At the beginning of the presentation, you had asked for a show of hands if we felt are we, I can't remember the exact phrase you used.
Becoming more connected or less connected.
Right,
with one another.
and so you're going to say we're less connected, but I see it the other way sometimes too. You can ask the younger generation that they feel more connected to their friends and the ability to meet other groups and find other people of similar interests.
Some friends of mine that are here tonight, we belong to a group called Toastmasters. Some of you are familiar with it. Tim's a member of Toastmasters, I am, Rudy, Virginia. And so I come in contact with a lot of people, all different walks of life. And when sometimes we're in meetings, and even those many times as you tell people to please silence their device, put it on silent, etc., and to hopefully give us the gift of their presence in that meeting, they still are sitting there texting, tweeting, checking emails, or whatever. Sometimes if you go, I call them handheld dinners or handheld cocktail parties. Sometimes you can go to a party, and if I'm talking to my daughter, so she might have a drink in one hand and her phone in the other hand. Do you think she's really paying that much attention
It's a perspective thing.
to me? So in social situations, I mean, it happens every single day.
But that's the way we were brought up.
No, I'm not
They
saying,
were
right.
the same way.
And I said in the beginning, I said millennials might communicate, because Josh and I had a conversation last weekend, and we were talking about how communication evolves. And it's going to continue to evolve, the way that we communicate with one another, because we've got different means to communicate. But it's how we use the technology. If we allow the technology to replace you and I, the interpersonal face-to-face communication, something gets lost in that, the human interaction. I don't have 5,000 friends on Facebook.
Okay, Tim.
They're not really my friends.
All right. Jerry, I'd like to hear the flip side. What do you see good about the mobile technology and the cell phone?
You have to call the police, the fire. If somebody's in an accident, you can call right away. I mean, there's all kind of different situations where that device becomes very important to us. But those other situations where it's not critical, it's not crucial, sometimes, I mean, it sounds ridiculous. They'll show sometimes, for example, something happens to a person. They actually, in Sweden and the UK, the gentleman was talking about how they filmed some of these things. So they were filming some people and how they would react to somebody. Let's say if Rudy just fell on the sidewalk. So would people actually go to his aid, pick him up, and help him?
Well, no.
People were coming with their cell phones
Right.
and taking pictures
Right.
instead of helping them up.
That's right.
And they did that with men, they did it with women, and they set up different situations. It's like John Kionis, he does, like, what would you do in a situation? It's on television sometimes. So they did the same kind of circumstance, and you go, oh my God, what if that happened to us? Would people just start taking pictures, or would they actually help us up? Again, common sense, you think, yeah, people would do that, but they don't.
Okay, Charlie?
Yeah, Charlie.
Yeah, in library school we studied information science developed by Bell Labs, and the aggregate amount of information being exchanged in every given day has grown geometrically. And what are you bemoaning that? It doesn't matter how it's conveyed. If you can expand the recipients of a message, and
agreed.
It's like if you came in my library, you insisted you only wanted a book. And I said, well, I can give you a movie or a magazine, or I could give you a lecture.
Right.
And you insist on one mode, when there are instances in which the other modes are significantly better.
It's a choice. It's a choice in terms of how you use it and what works for you.
I mean, do you want us all to go back to
not at all
sending letters in the U.S.
Our
mail
smoke-
with a stamp?
Our smoke signals or no.
No, so this facilitates communication.
Pardon me?
It facilitates communication. There may be instances, obviously, when you shouldn't be driving a car instead of doing 10 other different things. That could be applied to
But it applies,
anything.
Charlie, it applies to meetings.
Petting your dog or
It
whatever.
applies to meeting situations, it applies to social situations. Again, if you read the thorough study by Pew Research, I mean, it really digs deep into all these different scenarios and situations.
One follow-up. If you gave her a terrible, and one of your Toastmasters, the total zero, like D minus presentation.
Pardon me?
If at your Toastmasters somebody gave a presentation that was like a D grade presentation, looking at your smartphone wouldn't be authorized?
I'm not sure I'm understanding the question.
Well, if it's just choosing a more appropriate mode.
What Charlie's asking, I think, is whether if the presentation really sucked, whether I wouldn't be perfectly within my rights to pull out my phone and start checking my email instead of listening to the presentation I don't like.
Probably means I'm giving a pretty boring presentation
Yeah.
because I can't engage or hold the audience.
But what if I take a boring girl to dinner and
There you go.
Charlie, you're on your own. You're on your own right now.
I'd rather see what's on my smartphone than
Rudy Segovia.
talk to this girl. you know.
Yes, Jerry. First of all, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Very informative. At my age, I learned things that I know, and I know that I should and should not do, but I still do it. So it's good to be reminded.
Yes.
So thank you again. But what was your motivation for learning this much about safety with cell phones?
What was my motivation for it? Every day, I mean, I have 2 kids, two young adult kids. Nicole is my daughter, my son Kevin. And every day when I leave my office, I work from home. And I'm on the road quite a bit every single day. And a number of years ago, I gave a presentation specifically about distracted driving. So when I started looking at the numbers and then just seeing how people use technology every single day, i.e. again, pretty much their smartphones, and how they're interacting with one another, I thought, I want to dig a little bit deeper in that and see what the statistics and the facts say. And we witness it every single day, in terms of how people are using it. And so I started paying more attention to drivers, first of all. They're looking left, they're looking at their phone and they're turning right. I mean, all these different situations. Or if I was talking to someone, what bothers me, if I'm talking to this gentleman here and we're having a conversation, well, all of a sudden he starts paying more attention to his smartphone and to our conversation.
Go get your
smartphone. Right. So that just started me thinking more and more about it and different social situations. And then I started thinking about my kids and what would happen if I were the person driving that vehicle, as an example. And then I was reading a text from my daughter, and then I ran into someone else. So they got me a lot more interested in saying, you know what, I've been guilty of doing some of those things. I can't talk about it if I'm doing the same thing that I see other people doing. So that kind of started me down that road.
Oh dear. Carl? Yes.
Margaret.
Margaret.
Going on what Charlie was saying, he was
Margaret.
kind of putting down the idea of writing letters and pen, but they found that when you do write, and you do write by hand, it does something for the brain. So I wouldn't trash that idea of sending your letters through the mail.
And I love the idea that you brought that up, because the art of communication in general, in Toastmasters we talk about communication, but the art of communication via especially letter writing, that's becoming more and more a lost art, because people don't write letters anymore. And the same meaning that we would convey in an email isn't necessarily what we would write on paper.
You won't write on paper, right.
Because people, or even the use grammatically of the English language. Sometimes you almost need an interpreter to figure out what you're trying to say in an email, because they're using so many abbreviations sometimes. And I'm not just talking about the millennials, younger adults, I'm talking about older adults sometimes. And a growing percentage of women, more and more of them, are starting to text. It's a fairly large percentage. The time that they're spending on social media is increasing dramatically.
So to lose some of the English language.
Correct.
Margaret, I can send 500 emails or I can write one letter.
And I was joking before, we talk about multitasking, I mentioned that.
Right.
When you look at the studies on multitasking, because when they do these tests and cognitive tests on how people say, well, yeah, I can multitask, I can do this and I can do this at the same time. I can read a text, I can do this. Or, of course, when people are driving, they think they can multitask. But when they do these cognitive tests, it's just the opposite. The people that really boast that they can do these things, it finds out multitasking, your productivity drops down dramatically. And then when you're driving, that's...
Attention.
that just puts you in jeopardy, period.
All right. Sid Cohen.
How do you think that multitasking and all the computers and everything, how do you think that influences people's political outlook? Especially what's happening now between the candidates of the Republican and Democratic parties. Like, for instance, Trump. Why are so many people interested in Trump? He's so irrational. How do you think that influences it?
Everything we read on the internet is true.
That's right.
You know, we all have an opinion. We all have a choice. How we go about, you know, making that choice. I know I heard Charlie saying before when he's talking about another event that you're going to have here, and he put together a PowerPoint presentation for that. Does it influence people? Absolutely. Both positively and negatively. Because go back, and if we go back to, you know, if we go back to, what, 2008? Who did Obama reach out to?
Millennials.
And how did he do it? What did he do it through?
Facebook and social media.
Yeah.
And
he
a lot.
He really
Hit it hard.
embraced social media and using the internet to get young people to turn out to vote.
And he was.
As a matter of fact, I got a text from President Obama before the election saying your union supported me for Senate, so I asked for your support. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and I did as well.
Right. I guess they picked certain people, I don't know, like randomly or...
Yeah, how they pick their demographics on that.
They probably knew I was a Democrat and
I'm
I was
sure
in the
there's
union.
I'm sure there's spinsters figured that part of it out, but...
It did make a difference, though. I felt like, hey, you know, it's actually, you know, connected, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll get a one from Bernie, too, hopefully.
Okay, Carl?
Yeah, I like your comment about everything you read on the internet was true. Because I know that video has shock value or whatever, but I mean, the reality is suburban flat street, even any kind of collision, a car rolling 3 or 4 times over, I'm not...
Well, it's dramatized, of course, to make the point of, but even though that scenario is dramatized or that situation, that happens because when you look at the number of deaths, the number of injuries and that happens every single day. Here's I didn't say this in the beginning. There are more new handhelds activated every day now than new babies born.
What?
There are more handheld devices activated every single day than new babies born. In terms of texting, which I didn't share this with you before, the average person checks his or her handheld anywhere between 50 to 150 times a day or every 6 minutes.
Well,
okay.
Charlie.
Okay. I'm intrigued about this machine. You can ask it any question, and it gives you an answer. And being an old reference librarian, I always stood by the answers I gave people, the information. But can you trust this machine of yours to give you accurate information to tell you the truth?
Of course, the machines.
I mean, are there any questions that, like,
Hey,
who should I vote for?
Charlie, you want to try mine?
You know?
Why don't you get up and give us a quick demo?
Mine's an independent phone. You want to check mine?
I've never heard of such a machine. You know?
It's called Circe and Cortuna, Charlie.
Or something, you know, what kind of machine is this?
How are we doing for time, Tim?
It's right now about 7:39. We got some time for, but I, Jerry, if you want to take a few more questions, we can. If we want to go into rebuttals,
That's
we
up
can.
to you all. If you have other questions, I'd love to.
I did want
I
to
love
ask-
the interaction.
I wanted to ask one other question. If I
Yes,
All right.
please.
All right, Don.
Right
This
after
is a-
Robert Howell.
Sure, just a little
Okay.
bit. Oh.
Robert?
We already had one commenter say he has to have the phone for work, and I surmise that a lot of the culture now is driving us toward smartphones. I happened to go to a Tesla dealership and see one of their cars, and they had a 1.5-foot screen in the dashboard that was a touch screen to operate the car. So in light of how we're being channeled into screens, how do you recommend we escape the influence if it's everywhere around us, if we're
That-
walled
that-
in by them?
That's an excellent question, because I just read in this study, the Pew Research, they're talking about projecting into the future, because automobile manufacturers, first of all, the screens in the newer vehicles now, they're getting larger, right?
Yes.
They're getting larger. Now they're trying to figure out how they can disable some of the technology so that you and I don't text while we drive, we don't do certain things to put ourselves in jeopardy. And so they're trying to figure, and I think they projected by 2020 or 2021, some of these devices will be integrated into the new automobiles. And the interaction with technology, that's just going to get greater and greater and greater. But we still have a choice of how we interact with it. Is it going to drive us to that? Sure. Because think of mobile marketing. Josh markets online. How big is mobile marketing today?
Big.
It's huge. Most of the numbers. Yeah. Mobile marketing just keeps growing and growing and growing. You can't avoid almost getting a text or an email or something, some alert that somebody's trying to market to you. Every time we have that phone, they're tracking. Tim, what was a website that you gave where you could do that so they're not tracking your history?
What you can do, there's a web browser called,
Well, leave them there.
it's called the Tor network browser, and it lets you hide your hide your tracks. I can take a brief deal with it at rebuttal time.
So on your phone, they see what you do, they're tracking that, so for the price of a little flashing screen, they're collecting all that data.
All right, Ricardo.
I want my waitress.
Oh. Well, he didn't text her. Wes?
Since we got the waitress there, Heather.
Heather.
Happy Valentine's Day. Would you be my Valentine? All right, let's not forget her today.
All right.
We're gonna have free lunch.
Hey, that girl, Heather.
All right.
Okay.
So,
How about we?
yes, Wes Wagner.
Well, there are some advantages, like with texting, you don't have to talk to a real person. Also, a smartphone, I guess, the phone will think for you, you don't have to think.
What a concept, right? We start thinking less and less.
Okay.
Okay.
Are we ready to start rebuttals, you think?
Andy Anderson has not had a question yet.
Andy, you want to stand, please?
The law in Illinois says now you can't even talk like a headset or
Hands-free?
hands-free.
Right, when they do the studies, you can go to the National Highway Traffic Safety Association or the Pew Research or Virginia Tech Technical Institute, because the way that our brain processes information, if I ask you, let's see, sing or write Mary Had a Little Lamb and sing My Country 'Tis of Thee at the same time.
I only got one voice.
Can't do it. So the way people think they can process that information, they can't do it.
So you're saying that the police looking for people wearing Bluetooth or handheld hands-free sets now?
Unfortunately, some of the police, if you watch them some of the time, they're some of the worst offenders of that, and they've started to address that with law enforcement. Is that going to make them stop doing it?
Wait a minute. Do I get worst offenders on what?
Pardon me?
What are the police the worst offenders?
No, I'm saying because he's talking about Bluetooth. So if they're on there using their phones, no different. Just because they're law enforcement officers, that doesn't mean they can't be distracted like we can, because they've showed video of them blowing through an intersection, not with chasing someone, but just being distracted and running into someone else. There was a lawsuit back in 2008. The woman was in California, I think, and I've got it. I don't remember her name right off the top of my head, but I have that, where a police officer ran into them. They had determined that he just blew through the traffic signal. He wasn't chasing anyone. He ran into this woman. Her daughter was like 5 months old. Killed both her and the daughter.
I got a question. Okay, why would using a smartphone in a car be worse than using an old-fashioned cell phone that didn't have all that functionality? I mean, you kind of focus on the smartphone.
No, it's a
why
phone.
would that be different
If
from
you're
an
using your
old-fashioned
cell phone
mobile?
in that situation, cell phone or smartphone, if you're on the phone, if you're going through an intersection, let's say you and I are going through an intersection, if you're looking at that phone, all of a sudden your peripheral vision, it almost goes away. So you can't see what's coming from your right, you can't see what's coming from your left. They've done studies on that. There's more and more extensive studies. I mean, I know we talked a lot about distracted driving tonight, but there's more studies with that right now because the effects, you know, going back 10 years, so now you go back, it's 2016, so you go back 10 years, right, 2006, and you look now, they're starting to compile a lot of this information, the other ways that we're using cell phones,
And you're saying,
the effects on
and
it.
you're saying there's no difference if you use a hands-free device?
In terms of the way your brain processes information, no, sir.
Oh, wow.
It does not.
Right. It's a matter of attention.
Yes, because they've done, now they'll show, I was just telling Virginia, I just read a study last week that where they show the brain, they've actually, you know, looked at the brain and how you process the information and what parts of your brain light up and parts don't. You look at that.
Is it illegal now in Illinois to use a phone with a hands-free device while driving?
No.
So it's still legal? Okay.
A hands-free device you can use.
It has to be hands-free, but
TJ, I think this is the last question. Okay,
I
TJ?
mean, what would make having a conversation with a passenger any different than talking to somebody hands-free on a phone? Wouldn't that be the
if you're
same?
not taking your eyes off the road. Unless you, if I turn to the right for 2 or 3 or 4 seconds and not looking ahead of me, you have the same.
No, but I mean, what if you have like I have a loudspeaker, you know, and I put it on the floor and I turn it up, and like John would be talking to me while I'm driving, you know, and I'm hearing him.
If it takes your eyes off the road, if I'm reaching over because they've had collisions with, you know, buses running into semis running into buses parked, where again, they just take their eyes off. The subway accident, remember? The conductor, they determined that he was on.
What's that? Is that the one at O'Hare Airport?
The train that,
The one at O'Hare?
in California.
Yes.
Where it fell asleep.
Not O'Hare.
The O'Hare, the train went through, it went right through the
Through the
station
stop.
and kept on going and went right up the escalator into the.
He fell asleep.
And I know you have to wrap this up. If
Yeah,
any of you want
another
any
shift.
additional information, I'd be more than happy to either email it to Charlie or email it to Tim so he can distribute it to you with the Pew Research study or any of these other studies. And you can really, you know, again, I encourage all of you from that standpoint, just think about how we're all using the technology. It's there to serve us, and if we use it with some common sense.
I'm only accepting letters by mail.
Charlie, I still use Pony Express, so I'm sorry.
All right.
Telegrams.
Telegrams.
Like grandma.
Smoke signals.
And if you've been sitting on a question, you can always get it in the rebuttal, if you make a rebuttal. Okay, how many do have comments?
thank Jerry
to make?
first.
Thank you, Jerry.
Okay.
Now I can say I
Okay.
survived college of complex.
It's not over yet.
Raise your hand, how
survived
many?
nothing.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
He thinks he
9.
survived.
Maybe 10. All right.
We'll go about 5 minutes each.
About 5 minutes each then.
Tigers.
Okay.
Okay, remember Jerry has the final
Jerry gets the final
rebuttal,
word.
final
He survived.
comments. So you do get an answer.
Clock, you can see you can see the clock from the thing. We have a gentleman over here watching time, so go ahead.
I remember when I was a kid on the west side, in the summertime, you used to see people sitting on the porch and having conversations. And the kids would play on the street. They'd play different games and so forth and so on. And at night, they'd come in and listen to the radio. I don't know, they have the different things during the day, like these soap operas, but kids aren't very interested in those. And that's the way it was. They had a lot of communications, one person with the other, with their neighbor, so forth and so on. now there's so many different devices and so many different things going on. You have television, and then you have these smartphones and computers and so forth. And I think what happens more than anything else is you have advertisement. And the advertisement keeps coming out with new fangled devices. And they're updating this and they're updating that, and there's a new model for this and a new model for that. And when people get into it after a while, they go and look for the new model. They constantly want to be stimulated by something new. When I was a kid, you used to go to the library, and if you wanted to read a story, you go and read a story. You bring the book home and you read. And once in a while on Saturday or so, when your mother and parents had some money, you went to the local movie theater. But then now there's so many newfangled things. Like I said, people get so involved in these things. And I think the biggest distraction is advertisement and trying to sell products. We live in a very commercial world where new things have to be invented constantly, so people run and get the new thing. They have to have the new thing. If they don't have the new thing, they're not keeping up with the Joneses. They're not really living. And that's their way of living. Instead, in the old days, people would get together and have some interesting conversations, and they would get real enjoyment out of that. But now things have become so commercialized that I'm not against the newfangled things and the new devices, but you have to use it in a rational manner. If you need it for a particular thing, you use it. But you don't let that take the place of your life, living a rational life, and being allowed to be pulled by the nose into buying this new gadget and that new gadget.
I just want to emphasize that not everybody is the kind of person you're talking about. I'm all for technology. I got $4,000 hearing aids, and I'm very glad to have them. I couldn't even enjoy this presentation if I didn't have them. But hey, I don't have a handheld device. I don't have a cell phone. I do have a phone at home. I do have a computer. I'll be on that tonight for 15 minutes. The first thing I'll do is try to figure out how can I delete these emails. So there are people who do different things. I had breakfast with 3 friends this morning. None of us had a device go off. We had a chat. On Friday, I went to a meeting at Jane Addams Senior Caucus. There were, 6, 7, maybe 10 people there. Nobody had to look at their device. So there are people who are exceptions to the rule, who do not do these things. And I can see somebody in the, or I can't really see them, but I know there's somebody in the room here who had a computer and got rid of it. Thank you.
All right, this was a really good presentation tonight. Did Tim get you to come here? Okay. All right. Well, Tim's away right now, but okay. Well, that's good on Tim. And that video, especially that you showed, that was, with the crash, that was pretty shocking. Oh, here comes Tim. Tim, I was just saying, it's a speaker just told me that you actually you got him to come here, and that was really good for you that you did that. Anyway, that video was really shocking. Now, I've actually, I have seen some horrible accidents, including a head-on collision that looked like that, and I've actually been in some bad car crashes too. And I'll tell you something. I don't know how many of you have ever, been in a car accident, a really bad one. But where you had to be hospitalized, but it is no fun at all. And this is, cars are very, very dangerous thing. And now, I think that the number of people who use cell phones is really enormous. I mean, I have one. I think practically everybody here in this room has got a cell phone on them, and I have mine right here, and I have it turned on, although it's on vibrate only. So if I get an urgent phone call, at least I'll know the phone call came in, and I can decide whether or not to answer the urgent phone call. But it won't. Nobody will hear the ring. And which brings, I think that so I don't think people are going to quit using cell phones anytime soon. I mean, the benefits, what you pointed out, being able to call 911, being able to call people in an emergency and so forth, not having to miss calls, and having, like, you take my phone, I mean, I got an alarm clock, calculator, I can check my email. I can go. I can look at websites. I can do texting, of course. I have a still photo camera, video camera. All this built into a device that's small enough for me to carry right here. I mean, it's incredible. And I don't think people are going to give that up. It's too beneficial to them. I think there's two topics where you kind of criticize the cell phone. One is the subject of rudeness, and the other is the subject of danger. Now, on the rudeness category, you're talking about people using the phone, for example, during a lecture here, like I saw somebody doing earlier. I think it was actually you, Mike. Yes, and also TJ. He's not here right now. But anyway, now on the. And I've also gone to the movies and seen people, and I don't know why they would bother going to the movie, because they're sitting there texting away. Yeah, while the movie's going on. Why bother going to the movie then? You know, so I've seen people do it in the theater. I would say also using your cell phone when you're in company. You know, when you're with friends. Instead of giving them your attention I think that's rude, frankly, and because it sends the message, I care more about my own personal business than I do about being with you, even though I prearranged to be with you tonight. And now on the subject of danger, yeah, using your phone when you're a driver or even a pedestrian is dangerous. I don't, and I have to admit that the benefits. I'm not a pedestrian. I drive everywhere, but I'm an American. What can I say? And I live in the suburbs. So, So I'm not a pedestrian, but I do use my cell phone when driving. Yes, mea culpa. And frankly, I do it because the benefits are just too much for me to resist. I don't really have any other opportunities. I don't use my cell phone when I'm working. I turn it off so I can give my work my undivided attention. I don't use it when I'm sleeping, obviously. Well, there's only 3 things and I don't use it when I'm at events like this. So this means there's only 4 times. There's only 1 time left to me to use my cell phone, and guess what that is? Driving, because those are the only things I ever do. I sleep, I work, I come to lectures like this or movies, and I drive. That's it. That's my life. So that leaves the driving is the only time for me to use my phone. And I just want to also say that multitasking. Somebody mentioned multitasking. Multitasking is, I think, our lives are so are so loaded up with stuff to do. We have so many things we have to do, and they can't not be done, that multitasking is inevitable. So we do everything badly, but it gets done. And finally, I think that I just noticed that I'm out of time, but I'd just like to close by also mentioning that I think a lot of people, when they're using their phone and driving, they're playing the odds. They're measuring the odds of them actually being in a crash against the certainty of missing that important call. Oh.
We do dumb things with smartphones and other technologies. Case in point, teachers up teaching a class, her cell phone rings. Says, "Yes, that's right, Charles. Next time, just raise your hand." I talked to the president of my co-op, and she's giving me a phone number. She says, "Do you take text?" I said, "Kathleen, just tell me the phone number. Why is this so hard?" I have a garden group that I'm with, and I'm sending something out, I send something out to the email. This is not a good way to communicate. What I'm going to end up doing is calling each person or talking to them personally. When can you make the meeting? When can't you make? The personal connection is needed. There's something called a listserv, you know? This is not a good way to do things. This is definitely not a good way to do things. There's a place for it, but this, for the most part, a lot of times this isn't it. So communications, for the most part, it needs to be done like this.
Andy Anderson. You ready?
Hello, my name is Andy Anderson. I'm from the Northwest Information Service in Palatine, and we run an information service for the public that's free. It's a translation service where basically we translate large amounts of data, 20 pounds of paper in a wheelbarrow and 10, 15 books into a one-page Cliff Notes or condensed summary that somebody can read in 5 minutes. Because there's an immense amount of information in books that's not in the news. You'll find it on some internet websites, but there's been I worked with books up until the time I got my computer, shortly after 2000. But at any rate, Ralph Nader just published an article called They're Not Answering. Did any of you see that? It was on Common Dreams. He said it takes 5 or 6 calls, emails, or something to get through to a person now because they're not picking up their phones. I have a friend that lives on the south side of Chicago that I can't get a hold of because when you call her phone, the answering message on it is, please leave a message and I'll get back to you in the next 24 or 48 hours. So how can you talk to somebody like that just doesn't, well, she'll give you a call back in 2 or 3 days when she gets around to it.
Yeah.
Well, that's a friend that I can't communicate with anymore. There's another article on one of the sites. I use a site called Common Dreams, a news site that posts the best of the best every day without the junk food news of Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan going back to rehab, or the latest 7-Eleven robbery. The media feeds us 22 minutes of junk and 8 minutes of commercials every night. So if you want to know what's happening, you have to log on to news sites on the internet that are independent of advertising. Common Dreams is at my top of my list. There's truthout.org. The Smirking Chimp was formed one day after George took the White House and after the election. The Smirking Chimp has a logo where it's half a chimp face and half a human face. And some of the, like Robert Scheer, Harvey Wasserman, longtime activists, leaders in the progressive movement, they post articles. They'll show up on the Smirking Chimp first and then go out viral to tons of other sites. I carry cards with a list of what I call the portal websites. It's like a portal or a doorway into the other world where all the blacked out news is. So you log on to any one of these sites for an hour and your life is never going to be the same. Michael Moore's movie came out yesterday, Where to Invade Next, and it's a revolutionary movie. It's the best thing that he's ever done, and he shows, he doesn't talk about it, but Bernie Sanders is actually risking his life running for president. They killed John F. Kennedy, they killed Martin Luther King, they got rid of Bobby Kennedy, they shot down Senator Wellstone's plane 10 days before the election so they could get back control of the Senate. When people start talking about these issues, about what can be done to bring Americans up to the standard of other countries that stress human rights, universal health care, universal education, Michael Moore's movie spells that out by interviewing people in other countries and looking at how they live. I'm going to see it 3 or 4 times and take notes to digest it, and then as soon as it comes out on video, I'll buy a copy, 2 copies, and loan it to people. Nobody knows it's in the theaters right now. Last night out at Barrington Square at the 11 show, the 11 o'clock, there was nobody listed. I went to the 5 o'clock show, and there was 22 people in there. And it's the best movie that's out right now. There's another article. People are dependent. I know a lot of people are saying, oh my God, if I lost my phone, I'd be lost. My whole life is on my phone. We used to have pictures of things, an album. You used to have paper copies of letters. With only electronics as a repository of your history, current history, and things that matter to you. If you lose that phone, you lose half of it. And so I don't think it's any surprise that they want us to upgrade every couple of years. There's a lot going on other than just giving us the latest technology. Let me read something to you from, this is Will of Power, 1980, this book was published. The United States has reached a point where a few people, perhaps one person, could release enough radioactivity to make much of the U.S. uninhabitable. A small group could shut off 3/4 of the oil and natural gas to the eastern United States in one evening without leaving Louisiana. A few people could black out most of the country. A single hydrogen bomb could probably do all of these things simultaneously. If you get a country converted so that everything they have is dependent on microchips, then that's the ultimate Trojan horse. Any country fully dependent on microchips to run their banking, utilities, personal home things, they can be just sent back to the Stone Age by one single bomb exploded 200 miles out above Nebraska. You wouldn't even feel any blast. It's called the electromagnetic pulse, and there's no defense against it, and it puts out a pulse from a hydrogen bomb that will just fry microchips in phones, banking computers, everything. So if we're going to avoid putting the country in that kind of a risk, we have to think seriously about being so dependent on electronic devices rather than the way we used to do things where we have records on paper and everything else. If anybody wants any information on any of this stuff, I'll be over there. Come see me at the end of the show. Thank you. Go
Okay, ready?
Okay. Jerry, again, thank you for that presentation. It reminded all of us about distracted driving. I personally have been involved in about over 4,000 accidents. Well, let me clarify that. I was a Chicago police officer for 30 years, and I handled a lot of traffic accidents, about 3 or 4 a week. And a lot of them, the newest thing is driving while being on a cell phone, but also eating a hamburger and combing your hair and putting on makeup and, reading notes or writing notes. There's a lot of things that distract you. But the one thing I need to disagree with my friend Jerry, you might want to make a note out of this, is that police officers are not the worst offenders. You gave one case from 3 years ago, and that makes it the worst. So I'm sorry, I just had to say that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
I'm a subscriber to the idea that one needs to unplug. In fact, I didn't bring my phone tonight, and my phone is simply a phone. I have a data block on it so that I'm able to get no mobile data whatsoever on it. I do get texts, so text and phone. I have a simple phone, but I don't have it on me tonight. I didn't bring it.
Hey, good for you.
So I very much have embraced the message that he provided us, but I think that the subtitle of the speech, "Are We Becoming Zombies?" was not answered in the speech, and I also think it doesn't need to be a question. My very first speech before the College of Complexes more than a dozen years ago was entitled "Zombies Among Us," meaning that they are among us now. And I followed up that speech with a whole series of speeches aimed at how we are transforming ourselves into the model of the machine. We are now information processors like a computer.
Right.
Most of the information is superfluous, it's ephemera, it's not meaningful, it's not important. Yet, it's constantly coming at us. And most of us are subscribed to keep that fire hose of information aimed at us all the time.
Right.
People who turn off the fire hose, on the other hand, have a completely different outlook on life because they are not then a tool of the media. So let me speak briefly about two of the aspects that are missing from our speaker's speech. He basically gave us the scared straight version of media theory, which is, if you're doing this while you're doing that, then look out. And he showed us the video, and everybody found it shocking, at least when they weren't laughing and ridiculing it. Two aspects that I want to bring out. There's a neurobiological aspect and a philosophical aspect. Nicholas Carr, author of The Shallows and The Glass Cage, is the best author I know of writing about the neurobiological aspect, which includes a great deal of discussion about neuroplasticity, which is the brain's wiring being rewired by virtue of the things that we give our attention to. So if you're paying attention to this little screen, or now big screen, since tablets have started to replace smartphones with the same functionality, then what you're doing is you're shaping your brain for that device. And comic strips have made the point very clearly by showing people viewing the world through their phones. Literally, the world around them mediated through this screen that they hold up in front of their faces. So that's just one aspect of the neurobiological perspective, which was mostly absent here. He did talk a little bit about multitasking, and that's absolutely true. Self-reporting on multitasking is unreliable. People who think they can do it don't realize they're not actually doing it. There's what's called an orienting response. When something grabs your attention, you turn toward it and you orient yourself for that stimulus. What does that mean? You've left whatever you were paying attention to before, you've left it behind. The philosophical aspect is the more important one to me. And the best writer I know about this is Matthew Crawford. He wrote a book recently, or published a book recently, called The World Beyond Your Head. And it's basically a story about what we give our attention to and who we are on a philosophical and phenomenological level as a result. So his basic message is that if you're cued into this stuff, then you're missing out on that stuff. And as a result, you become this and you leave that behind. That's what we're doing with our constant embrace of electronic media. We're situating ourselves inside the media bubble, and we're losing ourselves as a result.
All right, you know, I have to say something about electronic media. I love it. I love the fact that I can watch what I want, when I want, on my television set late at night. And you know, it was kind of interesting because the other night I was watching on demand and I found a program that kind of illustrates the gap between the millennials and people our age on just how much of an impact technology is. How many of you are familiar with the series Younger, starring Hilary Duff? It's one of the newer ones out. It's about a 40-year-old woman who had a child and basically was going back to work, and she was having trouble finding work, and so she decided to move in with one of her gay best friends, and then she decided to become 26 again to learn to go back to work. Well, it's sort of a comic program, but it does give a lot of the difference between what she thought of at 26 years old and what she's trying to now adjust from being a 40-year-old to go back to 26. There was a couple of classic scenes in this thing. You know, she's working at this new publishing house. They think she's 26, and her publisher says, well, why don't you set up a Twitter account with her? Then all of a sudden it shows on the TV screen with her going to Bing how to set up a Twitter account. It also shows her with her old AOL email address going off and going into one with Gmail. And a number of other things came in, the women are talking with the cell phones, and she gets a book, says, no, I'll read the book. Well, why don't you just use it on your device with a PDF? No, I'll just read the book. But there's a lot more interesting purview on it. But the thing that kind of shocked me was, it's maybe a little bit of a comedic refuge between what happened in the brief 15 years this program has been around. But I said, my God, look at the amount of change in less than 15 years. I mean, 15 years ago, we may have had a cell phone, but we certainly didn't have Twitter, we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have any of these social medias. Yet we did have things like news groups, we did have things like email. And, when I even look at it from, about the base point of 100 years ago when they had mail delivery 3 times a day in London, and how they were saying that the postcard was going to be the ruination of everything because you had a chance to get an almost instantaneous answer when you sent out a piece of mail. A woman could write in a postcard, we'll see you later, and within hours get an answer back on that same postcard. Or the real change when we went from the 4-mile-an-hour world of horse-drawn carriages to when Samuel F.B. Morse came in on the telegraph. Used to be, he said, a trader could go in and spend a couple of months figuring out what he was going to do with his stuff and then go to London and sell his stuff. But now it's instantaneous, and human beings can't handle the situation. I've often said here before that, it was always women who were behind a lot of this technological revolution and what they liked. Did you realize that the invention of express shipping and the invention of the bill of lading with express shipping was done because of Mason Worth, who was the designer of the gowns of the Civil War, being in Paris, was getting orders by telegraph to have these gowns shipped right away overseas. And they thought it was an absolute miracle on how they could do this. And we have been in a globalized world before. Before World War I, there was a gentleman who could say, it was amazing that I could just get up on the phone and have the gifts and have the goods of the world delivered to my door within a few days. In a sense, this is really not something that's new, but just this pace has speeded up a lot. The amount of interactions have speeded up a lot more. And, over the next years or so, it's going to speed up a little bit more. But I also think, too, that like when they used to have the first telephones coming into the home, that eventually a source and a sense of etiquette finally about 10 to 15 years later comes as a result of it. And I think because the cell phone and smartphone are still kind of new, we are going to eventually catch up culturally with a sense of etiquette. When is it okay to use them? When is it okay not to use them? Like now we see it's not okay when you're at a lecture to talk on a cell phone when somebody's speaking. It's not okay. Maybe you can have it on vibrate, maybe you can text, but you're certainly not going to involve the speaker. Now, I applaud having a cell phone because you can instantly fact check with Google. But, again, it's coming. I think a lot of what happens with our technology is that we as human beings, it's been happening so fast that we just don't culturally have the norms in place to use it. We all know when you get on the phone, you say, hello, how you doing, who may I speak to? And there's a whole rule of etiquette that's been around for well over 70 to 80 years. I think given the next few couple of decades that we're going to see that same thing happen with our devices and our smartphones. Thank you.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Well, when somebody says multitasking, I immediately know they're going to screw one of the two tasks up. So it always happens. So, we're seeing that, the smartphone and the internet are kind of a more democratic type of media. Instead of a big one-way conversation with the networks and cable TV talking to you, it's a two-way conversation. And they're saying that if Bernie Sanders, it's highly unlikely, becomes president, it's highly unlikely, but the reason he's actually in the race, unless he gets assassinated, of course, is because of smartphone and Facebook, and the younger generation's spreading news about him through smartphones and Facebook and just the publicity in that sense. Whereas if you would have let the corporate media handle the Bernie Sanders campaign, you know what would have happened. You would have never heard a thing about him. So in a sense, I kind of like smartphones and the internet and the functionality and the democracy of it. Yeah, and there's a lot of neat things. You know, smartphones have voice and music recognition. If there was a song playing right now, you could put it up to a speaker and tell you who was singing the song. I was in Sears.
That's important.
Well, no, I'm a musician, so I was in Sears and I heard a great version of Winter Wonderland. It was Vic Damone. And I'm like, son of a gun. That was great. It was awesome. So I'm going to track down that and I'm going to get that. So, and then there's voice recognition if you want to, just you could speak a text or speak an email, and it'll print it out immediately. And then there's Facebook and ways to interact with people in that way. Twitter is pretty much a useless application. So there's some pretty neat things about a smartphone. It's basically you're carrying around a computer. It's nothing more, not that much more complicated than that. So, as long as you're not, driving and talking and texting and all that, you should be fine. So, that's about it. Thanks.
I really don't need name that tune technology. How much did it cost you? $600? No, the guy came along and gave you a smartphone because he liked you? Yes. Yeah, he said, hey, you look like you need one. Here we go. All right, let's thank our speaker very much. Thank you, Jerry. I hope you enjoyed it. Please come back. Thank you for your PowerPoint. Enjoy it. Hope you enjoyed it. And tell your pals to come out here. I don't really have too much to contribute. Been over this. A lot of you, I think, are kind of horse and buggy kind of Luddites. Anyone who's been engaged in photography, actually there's some talk in here that the smartphones are going to replace the camera. They'll replace perhaps the point, what we call Don would know this, these box cameras, perhaps point and shoot type cameras, but they're not going to replace legitimate cameras by any means. So the quality is significantly apparently good for the pedestrian uses that we for photography. Of course, the birthday cake, I guess quality doesn't really matter considerably. Another thing about technology and photography is anyone who's dealt with cameras they know that as soon as you buy a camera and as soon as you step outside the door of the camera shop, there's going to be a new model available. I still remember Canon came out with a version that Canon called the A1. I said, how long is that going to last before they get A2, 20 seconds? Jumping around, I find this machine that answers any and all questions rather intriguing. I mean, this is the power of all the libraries of the world. And the Library of Congress and all printed material and then I find another thing. By the way, and my brilliance, I brought to mind because we had to study indexing, and I heard Tim, you say that you do fact checking by using Google.
You can do it
a
sometimes.
Search engine, possibly the very worst way
of retrieving information, and I mean this, is a search engine.
You have to look
They
and pick
were
on what you choose.
discounted when I was in school, and we tried to develop mechanical ones, mechanical retrieval systems. I'm sorry, they're all flawed. Seriously flawed. You know, they try, and I know the algorithms and all these. As a matter of fact, I was really intrigued when they were developing search engines. I was really following this to see what they were trying to do. And they were all trying to be secret about how they operated and things of that nature. But no, they really don't. Now, the other thing that came to mind is here, and I mentioned it was information science, is how much information are you transferring? It's going from a stimulus response from point A to point B. If it's just these little text messages or even emails, there's actually very little information conveyed, and they're actually very, very poor at conveying information. Let's give you the difference between just reading something written on a piece of paper versus watching a television. You can see the amount of information that's conveyed from television. It's quite a lot of information conveyed as opposed to just something scribbled on a piece of paper. That's what, I guess, the simplest way I can do it. Now, the way they make up for it is by, I believe by volume. And that's where you get another term, information that is regarded as ephemeral, meaning it has a shelf life. And it's probably dated the day it was put out. And it goes sterile. And it grows inaccurate, Tim. Things of this nature, which you're using your search engine as the intimate source of truth in the world, I guess you the best of luck, or otherwise apparently one accepts any standards. But anyhow, that's just some of the technical thing. Now, I am a little disappointed, however, in your presentation. Now, for some reason, I've gotten interested in the topic of zombies. I even went so far as to purchase at the dollar store a collection of the disc with 10 zombie movies. And I really thought we'd cover a bit more of the zombies. And I had looked up zombie movies on YouTube and things like that. But the one thing continuing this theme of the zombies, which Bob started, on March the 5th, I think we're going to talk about the zombie voters. Who will elect the next president. Guess what the zombie, who the zombie voters are supporting, Russ, for president. Anyhow, thanks a lot. We had a good time.
Okay.
All right.
Next. Okay, Brom.
You guys are the zombie.
When are you going to put your Trump hat on?
Okay, Brom.
Besides moderating, I also have opinions. Last week we were having a lecture on classical economics, and I waved a book at you by Ha-Joon Chung. 23 things they don't tell you about capitalism. Well, it's written by not an anti-capitalist, but an economist, with a Chinese name. And he says that, many of the things that you get told about capitalism just ain't really the whole truth, or sometimes they're actually pretty distorted, and the defenses of capitalism and the free market and how all it is going to be better or it can't possibly get better are are fabrications, protections for the system and for particular interests. Well, I still recommend the book. I think that you don't need to be a socialist to have an awareness of that our economic system has its flaws, and that the apologies for it are somewhat half-baked very often, distortions of the facts. So I do recommend that book. But beyond that, there's an announcement I should have made, and that is told to me by my wife as I left the house tonight. There'll be something on the Black Panthers, since it's Black History Month. I mean, you all should know. The Black Panthers are part of American history. And we here in Chicago have had a lot of it. So I think that Tuesday night on PBS, you'll get a bit of television, a new film out on the Black Panthers, and it's historical, and it's something worth seeing. Okay. Let's see. Yes.
Channel 11?
Channel 11.
Margaret has enough.
Okay.
I made an announcement in my rebuttal. You can
Make a rebuttal in your announcement.
make one too if you want.
Oh, careful, Brom. Mind the cords.
Brom, watch the cords. You could,
Yes,
just, okay.
Watch the cords, not your cell phone.
Just want to read off some excerpts from some good publications, The Week Magazine and The Tribune. And this excerpt, I made some copies and I left them over there from The Week Magazine. It says here that our growing reliance on technology troubles many Americans. Sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, you guys.
73%, yeah, but it's hard to. Can't really do it. 73% believe our smartphones and other gadgets are making us lazy. 59% say they have a negative effect on literacy. And 69% think those devices are limiting interpersonal communication. Kind of a, similar to what. Okay, as I say, I have copies of this article. It's like polls are taken at the with material over there. Also, Tribune. This is really hard to. I'm gonna do. Does it come off? Doesn't it come off?
No, just
like that.
Shoot.
Don't you let him
Really
hold
can't.
it.
All right.
You think
And
multitask?
more than 25% of the people say distracted walking is a serious issue. The number of emergencies. Oh boy, sorry.
I hurt my knee.
The number of emergency room visits by injured, distracted walkers doubled with the rise in smartphones between 2004 and 2010. Is that when they started rising to about 2004? Oh.
yeah.
All right. Designated drivers driving of all. Let's see. Designated driving of all sorts killed at least, you gave the figure, 3,000 and so, percent who are text messaging went up 5 percentage points, is now 36% are texting while they're driving. And virtually everyone under age 50 now has a smartphone, and in the 65 plus of it going, they're about 69%. 46 states now ban texting while driving.
That's right.
And apparently nobody pays attention to that. That's about it. All right.
Okay. Thanks, Margaret. Any other rebutters? Any other rebutters?
Yeah, good.
Okay.
We got a postscript, 1
Yeah,
second.
go ahead, Charlie, we got a little time.
And then Jerry will wind us up.
I forgot to mention, I like to listen to the talk radio, the Arch Conservatives that Russ listens to all the time while he's on the road. But is this Mark Levin, is it?
Yeah.
And he was on there then, about this 46 laws, and he was going on, this is my right, I'm glad I traveled from New York, I crossed the state line into New Jersey, where I could talk on my phone or text and talk on my phone all I want. And then all the speakers, even though they're the Arch Conservatives, they called in and they said, you're absolutely wrong, you're an idiot. You know, what kind of thing is that, to, endangering your lives? This is foolishness. So forth. It has nothing to do with an exercise of individual. All the intrusion of the government telling me what I can talk on my phone. People said, stay out of our state.
Okay, let's welcome Jerry for the last word. You get the last word, Jerry. You're on. You got a few minutes, so.
I'll make this very short, actually.
I don't know.
You mentioned advertising.
Mark Levin.
Right now, the mobile phone companies, they are in fact the largest advertiser of anybody.
Yeah. Wow.
Procter & Gamble used to be the largest advertiser. If you turn on the television, you can hardly watch anything without a mobile phone commercial. I agree with you that in terms of media, because if we think of the messages we're all receiving, it's bombarding us from all different sides every single day. Most of those messages, first of all, are negative messages. They're not positive messages. So whether it's mainstream media, and I love the fact, and I don't remember, what's your name? Andy. I want to meet with Andy because the amount of information that people consume and they believe that information, be it accurate or inaccurate, and then that's funneled through media to especially, everything that we're digesting via smartphones a lot of the times, because more and more are relying on that versus, they're working at home or working on their PC. So what does that tell us in terms of if they're bombarding every single, and I don't care what station it is, even on cable or, the major networks, I would say, we know that commercials at least occupy 20 minutes out of an hour-long program. And if I don't know what the exact percentage is, but if you look at the amount of mobile phone advertising, it occupies a good percentage of that. And it's not 25% to 30%. So in terms of media, they are driving us towards, because we've got to have the latest shiny object.
Oh, yeah?
You've got a 5S, you've got a 6S, you've got a 6 Plus, whatever it is. It doesn't matter if it's Apple and or Android based, because Android phones now occupy the majority of the cell phone market. Apple's got about 17% and Android's got about 80 plus percent. And people thought that the Apple products, that they would overtake Android. Well, it's like Apple Pay, now you've got Android, because again, going back to the mobile phone companies, Samsung, now you have Samsung Pay, where they have a commercial where guys going into a delicatessen and they go, oh, you're going to pay with Apple Pay? He goes, no, I got Android. Guy says, that's never going to work. And he goes up and all of a sudden, bam, and he pays for a sandwich. So media certainly plays a big portion of that. It's a very interesting subject, I think, for me, and I'm sure for a lot of you. And that's a conversation we'll continue, because, when one of you got up here and you were talking about communication, to me it all boils down to if the machine and devices replace our face-to-face conversations, that's when I think we really have to be truly concerned.
Yes.
Because I have the opportunity to belong to this group, you heard me say earlier, to Toastmasters, and people talk about, well, let's take our meetings and let's put them online.
No.
And they say, well, let's do it via, teleconferences, let's do it. And I've been in those where the interaction between participants,
Yeah, it's not, no, there isn't any.
yeah, exactly. It's not the same experience.
Yeah.
One direction.
And I've asked this question, when people come to meetings, I said, when you've left a meeting, have you ever felt more uplifted, more positive, better than before you walked into that meeting? They go, absolutely, I felt a lot better and felt more uplifted because Gene and I are talking to one another. Tim and I are talking to one another. We're exchanging ideas, and we might have different philosophies, different points of view, but isn't that what it's about?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Tim could text me all day long. I talk to Tim at least 2-3 times a week. I have clients. I own my own business. And no exaggeration, if a client calls me and they go, Jerry, are you driving? Like, yes. Call me back when you get somewhere where it's safe. They won't talk to me. When I call a client sometimes versus emailing them, because, sometimes that's people's preferred method of communication, I call them. They go, oh my God, Jared, you call me. My thought is, well, why wouldn't I? I want to talk to you. Our Virginia works for Underwriters Laboratory, and she gets these strings of emails back and forth, 10, 15, 18 different emails, and she's a data governess, and all of a sudden she goes like, I could have solved this in like 5 minutes.
Right.
Rather than 15 or 18 emails.
Yeah. That's right.
Documented it.
Yes, it's just, anyway. I think, again, it just all comes back to, if we use a little bit more common sense about how we're interacting with the devices, it's not that difficult, it's not that complicated, but when people rely on that, and it causes them, puts them in situations and circumstances where it jeopardizes other people's lives, it breaks down those communication. My daughter, as I said earlier, she's a millennial, and even she's starting to, and some people are actually, you mentioned about pulling away. A lot of people now are unsubscribing to their cell phones. It's a growing trend.
Oh, really?
Yes. It's a growing percent among young people. Because when they see the cost of that mobile device, Virginia and I were working the math, sometimes when you look at the social, not economic picture of it, and you have people working a minimum wage job, making $8.50 an hour, whatever it is, and then you see them with a $650 smartphone.
But it's got ISIS.
And then they're paying for the monthly subscription fee. So in a year, if you did the math, and on average, it's costing them, okay, but they're only paying $27 a month for that phone. Okay, well, you amortize it out, it comes down to about $650. Add that to the subscription. So that phone over a year period is costing them somewhere between $1,500 to $1,800 a year.
Yeah.
So, but I think a lot of the information, I'm digging deeper and deeper into this because it's such an intriguing topic. And as Tim said, you fast forward 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, can any of us even fathom what that might be? Because there's so much information, and I agree with the other gentleman, we said it's coming at us so fast and so quick, it's like it's so overwhelming, it's like, so is that a good thing? Or is that a bad thing? How we consume it, I think, is everything.
We can handle it at the college.
True. But I do look forward to coming back to the college complexes because I like what he said about, if we get into really, talking to Charlie's talking about zombies, we can have a whole lot of fun discussions about that when it comes to technology, and certainly we can have a lot of fun with that when it comes to communication. So I really appreciate being here tonight. I appreciate the questions and the responses. It's stimulating, it's been invigorating for me, and I look forward to coming back again. Thanks.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap.
Thank you all for coming.
Oh, sorry.
And the class is dismissed.
Carl.
But come back.
Did I graduate or not?
What?
I want my diploma.
Yeah, well, me.
Only when you graduate.
All you need is a copy.
All right. That costs $6,000.
You got your
You know, I really think, I was really glad.
That was a good topic. Because I get up to every day when I check my emails.
You know, let's save money for everybody, and so we don't have to get in our cars and drive across the metropolitan area to hold our meetings. Let's just teleconference. And well, you know what happened when they started doing it? The group basically died. And I told him it was a bad idea. He was